Okay, so before we start talking about tiled backgrounds, one of the things that needs to be understood is the different sizes and how it all comes together. Keep in mind that all of this is flexible depending on the style and what you want your game to look like. Obviously, the bigger the game, the more pixels, the higher the resolution. It's going to look better than a small game with less pixels and lower resolution. So I'm giving you a couple of examples here just so you can actually see it. It's easier to visualize it, I think, than to talk about it. So first is the layout size. That's like the whole game world where everything happens. All the objects, everything that's going on is happening within that layout size. And in Construct, your layout size you can change however you want. This is just one example for easy math. Here's your layout size 1280 by 1024. So generally your viewport size will end up being 1/4 of that. So to figure that out, you take your layout size, divide by 2. That makes your viewport size 640 by 512. Now, if you have a platformer, which is like running across the screen, you could tile by 4, as long as the tile sort of repeats itself and there's not much of a stitch line, and you could create a 4-tile layout. So I'll show you what that looks like. So if you take that layout size, that 1280 by 1024, and divide by 2, again, that gives you your viewport size, but it also allows for 4 tiles to fit here. So each tile is the same as a viewport at 640 by 512. You could do smaller tiles and it changes the look of it, and I'm going to show you an actual example right in Construct of how this can change as well. So here we have the layout size divided by 4. That gives you 16 tiles, and that tile size would be 320 by 256. So it does read differently. I left the lines to show you guys the different tiles, but in most cases you'd want your tiles to be seamless. So let's go ahead. I'll show you in the shooter game a few different, I guess, choices for you to replace your background. So in this case, our layout size is 1708 by 960. The viewport size, if you go under Project Properties View, you can find out what your viewport size is right here, is 854 by 480. Which I believe divides out, and this is the reason that the tiled background is the size it is. So when we double click on that tiled background, it's going to pull up your tile. And down here it gives you the size, 256 by 256. So that's a decent size. If you wanted to change that, you certainly could. I'm going to show you how to bring in your own tiles, but also how you can go to the internet, grab one, and change that. Let's do that one first because that's easier. So you're going to go to Google. And if you search 256 by 256 textures, let's just do textures. Go to images. I guess that doesn't work. Let's do textures rock. And find something we like. So this is much different than the background we currently have in it. And one of the things you want to check when you hover over the preview is that it's 256 by 256. This one is not. It's 230 by 239. Here's a 256 by 256. So let's find one. I kind of like that one. Oh, it's too big. Okay, let's gotta find one that is 256. Here we go. This is 256 by 256, much lighter. We're gonna right click, save image as, save it to your downloads, white BG, I'm gonna call it. Save. Go to your Construct game. You're gonna double click your tiled background, go up to the folder, and go ahead and grab that new tile. And it's gonna bring it in. Close it out, and it'll automatically place it in there for you. So this certainly changes the look of the game. Now it looks like maybe they're out in the snow. So when we talk about color and texture in games, you can see how much it affects the mood. So that definitely changed the game a lot. So now I want to show you what happens when you start messing with the size of your background tiles. So I'm going to just Control-Z to undo that. I've already created some different pixels here, and I created just a generic tile here, and I saved it in some different sizes. You can do that very easily. So say you create a tile and you bring it in, you're like, you know what, it's too small. I need to add more detail. I need to blow it up. You can always go back into Piskel and resize right here in this little resize icon and resize it. So this one I originally made 256 by 256. I saved a smaller version and I saved a larger version, and I want to show you what that looks like when you bring it into Construct and how that changes the overall look. So if I double click tiled background and I bring in let's bring in the small one. So I went ahead and saved that tile in 3 different sizes. I have a 128 by 128, I have a 256, and a 512. They're square tiles. So if I bring in the 128, you can already see it shrunk down on the screen, and here it is. So it's not bad. There's a lot of lines because that's the way it was designed. It's not the greatest, but it works. I think that for the size of the character, it's not bad, and I like the colors. So it works. Now let me show you what happens if we were to bring in that larger one. So go back into your tile, your folder, and I'm going to bring in the 512, quite a bit bigger. And you notice when it pulls it in, it's bigger here as well. And it's much different. So we play the game. Problem with going bigger like this, sometimes you really start to see the different lines between the tiles. You can see the stitch lines. So that's something when you design your own tile you want to keep in mind, is cleaning up those stitch lines and making sure if it repeats that those don't exist. A way to cheat is if you do have them. As you saw, my tile was better at a smaller size. So sometimes you can hide those stitch lines with a smaller size. So that is it for that. The other thing I want to show you was a platformer tile that I've made, and I made this background in Piskel. I'm going to go to that really quick so you can see. So for this pixel size, I made it 320 by 256, and I brought it into my game. This is the game I'm working on currently, that the size layout is 1280 by 1024. So if you do the math on that, this tile will fit perfectly in my layout 4 times. So I put a platform in, and the character will run across this platform, drop down, and run this way. So when you go to view it, it's closer, obviously, and I don't have a guy playing yet. But you're only going to see that one tile of the 4, but it's going to repeat. So when you go to make your own tiles, keep size in mind, and also look at the stitch lines. You don't want anything overlapping, and if it does, you want it to repeat nicely. And I'll talk about that in a different tutorial. So good luck.